Well, tributes are pouring in today for a Canadian broadcasting legend. Veteran news anchor Lloyd Robertson has died at the age of 92. Robertson spent more than 4 decades delivering the news. He anchored the National here at CBC before moving in 1976 to CTV, where he fronted its flagship news program for 35 years. His career spanned nearly a dozen federal elections, 2 Quebec referendums, and the 9/11 terror attacks. Colleagues are remembering Robertson as a trusted journalist who helped set the standard for TV news in this country. And my next guest knew Robertson incredibly well, both personally and professionally. Lisa LaFlamme took over from Robertson as the anchor of CTV's national nightly newscast. She joins us today from Bayfield, Ontario. Lisa, it's always an honor and a privilege to get to speak with you. Of course, I wish it was under better circumstances. First, I want to ask you just how you're feeling today.
Oh, well, I heard the news last night, and I knew that Lloyd was unwell, and it's just one of those calls nobody wants to get. Lloyd is, as we've all been saying and hearing, such a legend. But for me, he was also a great friend and a mentor for, 35 years, to be honest. And I'm sad. I'm sad for his beautiful daughters, his amazing wife, for the family, and for everybody that knew him and loved him. And I just realized in my reflections how absolutely fortunate I have been to have been plucked, if I can put it that way, by Lloyd Robertson. He used to go home on his dinner breaks from the national news. It was very traditional to go home on his dinner breaks and watch local newscasts. And I was working at CKCO in Kitchener at the time, and he claims that he was the one who saw me and said, "We need her." And honestly, from that moment on, my life changed because of Lloyd Robertson. And I became a better journalist and also just a better human being, because Lloyd was all of those things. He was about the news and about the fairness of it, but he was also about the humanity of it. And I just have so much to be grateful for that he's been such a part of my life.
When you are going through these reflections of his career, of your relationship, of course, as well, what are some of the, let's say, main anecdotes or stories or points of significance that you remember the most from your interactions or from watching Lloyd Robertson as he performed his job to the standard that he did every day?
Artie, do we have 6 or 7 hours or 6 or 7 days? I could tell so many stories. But I want to just, for context for people to understand, I grew up in a house where we watched Lloyd Robertson every night. And for me, it would have been about maybe grade 6 or 7. And never could I have imagined in my wildest dreams, even though I always knew I wanted to be a journalist, that I could ever follow him in the big chair, as he called it. And I think what I want to share, first of all, is that day, that the transition from Lloyd Robertson having been the national chief anchor for CTV, for CBC before that, and CTV for over 40 years. And he really guided me, and he wanted me to be the replacement. He felt that I had whatever it took. Who knows? And that day, there was so much joy. It was such an honest goal for him to make sure the job was in the hands of somebody he trusted and someone who respected news the way he did and Canadians the way he did. And it was such an honor for me that he even thought that way. But there are so many stories, going through the years of reporting. And I always felt, no matter what story I was covering, no matter where in the world it was, you'd get that call from Lloyd, the news meeting, and you'd have to share what your story, the contents of your story, or what you were going to be delivering that night. And you did not want him to ask a question that you did not know the answer to. And he was diligent. He knew more about the story than you did, and you could be standing on the ground in Baghdad. So you had to really do your homework. And I always felt, I was working for Lloyd. I wanted Lloyd to be proud of the story that I would deliver at the end of the day, and that he recognized that it would be the fair and honest reporting of whatever was unfolding. But he was I'm going to talk a little bit about the royals, because Lloyd was, first of all, he was like an encyclopedia for the royal family. He deeply respected the Queen, and he knew every title and the history of it all. And whenever you'd accidentally say Princess Diana, he would correct you. It's Diana, Princess of Wales. I mean, we had to get it right. Mm-hmm. And so many times we would travel together to whatever the story was, a pope, the death of a pope, new pope, the death of a royal, the royal weddings. And he was so generous with his time. And I think that's one of the things that's incredibly rare, is he didn't, take over. He knew you were there to report from the ground, and he gave you the time to do the proper reporting. And that's an incredible gift for an anchor to do that, because the average story is like 2 minutes, as you well know. If it took more, he gave you more.
Lisa, you've described how he really set this standard when it comes to a network anchor as well. It was an era of news that was viewed very differently when we talk about the time when Lloyd Robertson began and continued to anchor the national newscast. Anchors were icons. They could be revered. But something that I've been hearing in a lot of reflections is that he stayed incredibly humble. So finally, that's my last question for you. That specifically, what did you experience with him in the humility, given, of course, the stature that he carried?
Oh, this is the key. I mean, I think partly it's because, he was from Stratford. I was from Kitchener. He had 4 daughters. I came from a family of 4 daughters. He literally was so real and so grounded in all of your conversations. There was never the hierarchy. There was always respect on both sides. And you brought up a great point, Artie, because as the news cycle started changing, he was always really willing and interested in what the newest platform would be. And I remember when Twitter came out, and he'd figured out, oh, this is actually something. People are onto this, and he'd say, what's the tweeter saying? He wanted to know what was social media saying. That did change over years, I'm sure you can imagine, but there were so many things that made him just so real. Every Friday night he would bring ice cream to the newsroom, so everyone working on a Friday night, whether we were up in a bureau, anyone in the building, we would shuffle in and Lloyd would have ice cream for you. Thursday nights, we used to go out after the show and have what he called sippers, and just a debrief on what the show was, where the news cycle was going, what did we have to focus on next. All of these things that made him, a roll up your sleeves journalist, a colleague, and a friend. But I have to share, because I'm here in Bayfield, that how human he was. I'll never forget on my 50th birthday, and I had a party at the cottage, and Lloyd drove all the way up with his amazing wife, Nancy, and he said, oh, you've got a karaoke machine? And he just took over that microphone and did Song Sung Blue that would have made Neil Diamond cry. It was just brilliant, and he was just so real, such a fun person, and a good-hearted, honest man. And I always think some people make history and some people shape history. And for me, Lloyd shaped my life and my career. And I have him to thank for all of the privileges that I also experienced in the news business, what it was then and what we hope we will see return in the future, if I can put it that way. He was a truly great man, and I'll miss him so deeply.
Lisa, thank you so much. I'm grateful to you for sharing your reflections. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Artie.
That is
God
Lisa
bless you.
LaFlamme. She is a former CTV National news anchor. She joined us today from Bayfield, Ontario. Thanks, Lisa.